I got it. That's good.
Yes, sir.
Oh. Those steps never get easy.
Steve, are you okay? Once we get going, I just hand it to Carson after we do minutes and.
Sure.
Okay.
I think he's.
And you have his presentation ready to go?
Yeah, we do.
Great.
We got it all ready to roll.
Right.
Goes downstairs.
Yeah.
Partners.
Hey, David.
Good. Start your camera.
Ready? All right. Good evening and welcome to the Finance Committee meeting. It is January 19th, 2022. It's 6:30 p.m. Could we do a roll call, please?
Joe St. John.
Here.
Damon Capel.
Here.
Maureen Neff is absent. Tim Gose is absent. John Grumney.
Here.
David Martin.
Here.
Cindy Cooper. Here. 5 present.
All right. And we did have a meeting on December 15th. And I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes. We have just enough to approve if needed. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Damon Capel. Discussion. Roll call.
Joe St. John.
Yes.
Damon Capel.
Yes.
John Grumney.
Yes.
Cindy Cooper.
Yes.
Dave Martin.
Yes.
5 yeas.
Right. It's my pleasure to introduce Carson Weiss from Tishra Weiss, who has completed an impact fee analysis and would like to share some of the findings from the report. It's been a long work in progress, and we're glad you're able to make it here this evening, Mr. Weiss. Thank you again.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm just going to do my presentation from my computer, and I think they're going to advance it. So
Yeah, we've got
sideways to-
we had it. It
Try this again. It was there a minute ago.
was it really?
Try. Maybe it's under Google.
There it is. Wait, no, I saw it.
It was just that.
It's there.
I practiced. It's really.
Yeah, we actually did.
I practiced.
Looks like we got it.
This is the first one, not the one I just gave.
This is the
Yeah.
first one.
Excellent.
And real quick, so folks that are streaming won't be able to see this.
So we've got it shared.
You're sharing it.
Yeah.
Good work. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, I'm Carson Weiss, president of Tishra Weiss. We're an economic and fiscal consulting firm based in Bethesda, Maryland, and Boise, Idaho. We've been in business now for 44 years. We specialize in impact fees, infrastructure financing strategies, fiscal and economic impact analysis, market studies, and utility rate studies. And you can see here a substantial amount of work around the country. I'm on the first slide. Okay. So you can see from the map, we've done work all over the country. We've done quite a bit of work here in the state of Ohio. Most recently, we did impact fees in Delaware as well as Lebanon. In fact, we're working in Lebanon right now. Next slide. A little bit about impact fees before we get started. They are one-time expenditures for growth-related infrastructure. They are only paid by new development, not existing residents or businesses. They are not a tax. And the reason I say that is I can't tell you how many bodies I've stood in front of and heard somebody in the audience or somebody on the town council or county commission, et cetera, say this is just a tax on new development. I think it's important that we distinguish between a tax and a fee. Tax is primarily revenue raising in nature, depending on the state. You may have to go to the voters to get approval to tax. And a fee is typically designed to cover the cost of the service. So for instance, if the town has a fee for reviewing a subdivision plan, typically that fee is designed to cover the cost of labor and overhead in order to provide that service. Now with impact fees, it's much stricter than that. We have to meet 3 prongs of the legal test. First, we have to show nexus or need. So just the act of doing the study sort of tells a story about the community has grown in the past, that growth is going to continue in the future. So as part of the study, we have to project land uses going forward. And so that sort of satisfies that nexus, and that growth is going to generate the need for additional infrastructure. We also have to show benefit, and we show benefit 2 ways. One is through the timing of the expenditure, meaning that we just can't sit on the money for 10 or 15 or 20 years. We have to spend it within a reasonable time. Some state enabling legislation actually specifies the amount of time you have to spend the fee. And then we also have to show benefit through geography as well. And that typically doesn't happen, or it's not an issue in a smaller community like this. This is more for large counties or school districts. The idea here is that, for instance, we're not collecting, like we're doing this fee in South Carolina right now, where the rural part of Lancaster County has no growth. The northern part has all the growth oriented towards Charlotte. And so we've developed a school fee there, and the only payers are in the north, because that's where you're building capacity. If we were to collect a fee in the south and then build schools in the north, those fee payers aren't receiving the benefit. So that's what we mean by the benefit test from a geographic perspective. But in a community such as Sunbury, where it's very small geographically, you're providing levels of service on a town-wide basis, we don't need to establish service areas to it. We also have to show proportionality, and that's why you'll see the fee schedule vary by residential and non-residential land uses, and within subsets of that. So we just don't have a residential fee and a non-residential fee. We have single family versus multifamily. We have retail versus office versus industrial. All these land uses generate different demand indicators. So for instance, a demand indicator for parks would be the number of people per housing unit. And typically single family units have more people than multifamily units. And from a non-residential perspective, for instance, for transportation, the demand indicator is usually trips or vehicle miles of travel. And retail uses generate more of that than office and industrial. So the fees need to be commensurate with that impact. So this table summarizes the different fee categories, which are municipal facilities, police, parks and recreation and roads, it's a countywide service area. It also has methodology. I'm going to spend a minute talking about that. The way to talk or think about doing impact fees is you can look to the past, you can look at the present, and you can look to the future. So you see there cost recovery, incremental expansion, and plan-based approaches. So the cost recovery is when we look to the past. And the idea here is that the community has oversized its infrastructure either through forethought or on accident. Irregardless, you've got excess capacity. So a simple way of demonstrating this is, for instance, if we were doing a utility fee here, and let's say the town had built a wastewater treatment plant, it was 10 million gallons a day of capacity, and current utilization is 6 million gallons, we would design the fee to recoup the remaining 4 million gallons a day of capacity. So new growth is buying into it. Another example is, lots of communities may have just built a large public safety building 3 or 4 years ago, and they've got debt for the next 16, 17 years. And it's been oversized to certain growth. We can design the fee to recoup new growth's fair share of that facility. When we look to the present, we call that an incremental expansion or consumption-based approach. It's by far the most popular method. And it's sort of formulaic in nature in that it takes levels of service, for example, the number of park acres per person. It gets that level of service in, and then it looks at, well, what does it cost to buy an acre parkland on average? What's our amenity inventory? And the idea is that we're going to expand the system incrementally. It's sort of impervious to growth rates. And I'll give you an example of that in a second. But if growth is faster, you just collect more money and you build more infrastructure. If growth is slower, you build less infrastructure because you've got less money. In contrast to the plan-based approach, which is based on usually some sort of master plan, like a utility master plan or transportation master plan or parks and rec master plan, where you basically say, we are going to build facilities X, Y, and Z in these years, and here are the funding arrangements. You may get a larger fee in terms of more bang for your buck, but you're also somewhat vulnerable to the market. So, for instance, if growth is slower than you anticipated, you still have to build that plan. It's just you don't have as much revenue available, and so the general fund or another revenue source has to fill that gap. The general fund is sort of immune to those sort of conditions if you're doing that consumption-based approach, because you're only building to the level that you collect, and there's no growth share, so to speak. This table here summarizes the development projections. This is part of our, the impact fee study part that is looking at showing the nexus. And I have to get my glasses out to do this. So we were projecting residential and non-residential development. We are projecting an increase of about 533 housing units over the next 10 years. That equates to about 1,630 new residents within the town. We're also projecting 524,000 square feet of new non-residential activity, with the lion's share of that being commercial. And that equates to about 1,363 new jobs within the town. Now, the first fee category we're going to talk about is municipal facilities. It is a town-wide service area. The fee components include municipal facilities. We are using that incremental expansion approach, and we have to determine proportionate share. So that's essentially the amount of infrastructure, percentage of infrastructure that's dedicated or serves the population or the residential base versus the non-residential base. And residential is allocated population, non-residential to jobs. And so the way we do that is we look at a measurement called functional population. And so that it's an examination of how many residents within Sunbury both reside here and work here, what percentage of your workforce or residents go elsewhere to work, and then what's the inflow of commuters into the community in order to measure that basically of your daytime population. And so when we do that sort of measurement, in Sunbury, we get about 75 to 25% ratio. So 75% of your municipal facility infrastructure is dedicated or serves the resident population, 25% is serving the non-resident population, or excuse me, the non-residential population. So in order to determine levels of service standard, I told you it's sort of a formulaic approach when we do the incremental expansion approach. And so we've looked at your inventory of general government type facilities, includes the administration building, this building here, as well as the salt barn. We look at the square footage, and then we look at, well, based on the standard of the build or the build quality, what is a good square or per square foot cost to use to generate the replacement cost. As you can see here, for your general government facilities here, it's $254, and the salt barn, which is obviously at a very different level of construction, is $44 a square foot. And so the asset value is about almost $3.3 million. We then compare that using those proportionate share factors. 75% of that is allocated to residential, 25% to non-residential. And so we get our levels of service in terms of square feet per person, square feet per job. And then you multiply those by the weighted average cost per square foot of $194 to get our cost per person and cost per job at the bottom of the table. Next slide, please. So what we like to do is because it's somewhat nebulous when you just look at the previous slide. So what does that mean in terms of infrastructure? And so what we do, since we know that the growth is going to generate demand for new infrastructure, and the town is likely going to expand its municipal facilities and buildings, but we don't have a firm plan yet. So we wanted to illustrate, well, what does this really mean? So the top part of this table shows your levels of service standards in terms of square feet per person and job. And then we compare that to the projections of population and jobs that we saw from the previous slide to determine demand. So if you look at the bottom of the table, the total square footage attributable to growth is about 4,506 square feet, okay? And that has a cost of about $875,000. Now, the town could choose to build a 10,000 square foot municipal facility. However, if you do so, new growth is only going to pay about 45% of that. Anything that you build above the 4,500 square feet would represent an increase to the town's level of service. And of course, we can't use impact fees to elevate our levels of service, okay? So this is the proposed municipal facilities fee. We compare the cost per person and cost per job to the different demand indicators. For residential, it's person per housing unit. For non-residential, it's jobs per 1,000 square feet. And the proposed fee is $1,254 compared to $220, which is your current fee. And then $804 is proposed to multifamily versus your current fee of $191. And then from commercial, it goes from $400 a square foot for commercial space, $272 for industrial, $508 for office and industrial, or excuse me, office and institutional uses. So what does that mean in terms of revenue? Well, as I mentioned during our discussion of the methodology, there is no general fund exposure, so to speak. So you see here, the projected fee revenue when compared to the projected expenditures are fairly close. It's usually a break-even proposition or within a few percentage points of the fees versus the actual cost. Now turning to parks, again, townwide service area. The only component for parks is parks amenities. We're not including the land component. It's assumed that the town does not purchase additional parkland over the next 10 years. And from a proportionate share perspective, it's allocated 100% to non-residential development.
Residential, right?
Yeah. What did I say? Non-residential?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Residential development. My fault. So similar to what you saw from municipal facilities, this is your current inventory of park improvements or amenities. And then we'll get the number and then sort of the average unit cost if you were to build those today. And that value is about $1.6 million. And there's 49 total units. And this comes directly from your Park and Rec Master Plan. Next slide, please. There we go. So go back. Oh, there we go. No, go back. There. So compare those 49 units to that weighted average cost of $33,325. We get a cost per person of $259. Next slide. Now, similar to what we saw in municipal facilities, we have come up with a projection of demand for additional park improvements. And essentially it's about $422,000 worth of new park amenities over the next 10 years. Of course, you can choose to build more. It's just that growth can only pay for a certain percentage of that. Now, this next slide, please. Oh, sorry. Looked like another one. Yeah, so here's the proposed park fee. It's $825 for a single family unit, $529 for a multifamily unit. And this would be a new fee. You don't have an existing fee in place. And then let's look at the revenue projection. Yet again, similar to municipal facilities, the projected fee revenue approximates the expenditures. It's about a $1,000 difference there. Now let's turn our attention to police. Townwide service area there. Police facilities, the bricks and mortar station space is a key component as well as the vehicle equipment. We're using that incremental expansion approach, proportion share. We use those same percentages. However, the difference here is from a non-residential perspective, rather than allocating the cost to jobs, we're allocating it to non-residential vehicle trip-ins. And the reason we do that is if we were to allocate to jobs, office would have the highest impact fee for police and fire. We're doing fire as well because it has the highest employment density. However, we know that public safety calls are more a factor of the presence of people overall at an establishment, and retail and commercial uses generate high numbers of public safety calls, whether it's police or fire. And so vehicle trips model that relationship because the trips account for not only visitors coming to a property, but also the employees as well. Again, here's the proportionate share factors, same as what you saw before. And here is our police headquarters. It comprises right around 3,000 square feet of your existing facility and has a value of about $764,000. When we look at our levels of service per person per trip, that's in the middle part of the table in green. And when compared to our cost per square foot, we get cost of $91 per person and $12 per vehicle trip in. Same analysis for the police. There's 7 vehicles in the fleet. The average replacement cost is $55,000, and that results in a cost per person of $46 and $6 for a non-residential vehicle trip. Now, we look at our demand. We compare the levels of service to projected growth and population vehicle trips. Generates a need for about 825 square feet of additional space. Obviously, you can build more. It's just the growth that we pay for it through impact fees. Same with vehicles. There's a projected need for 2 new vehicles. It costs $105,000. And then our proposed fee is $437 for a single family unit compared to $280 for multifamily. These are increases over your existing fees. And then from a commercial perspective, or excuse me, non-residential perspective, retail and commercial is $234 per 1,000 square feet compared to $37 for industrial and $92 for office and institutional. And then the fee revenue projection is here. Again, the revenue approximates expenditures. Now we're going to turn our attention to roads, which again has a townwide service area. We did take a plan-based approach to this based on identified improvements, and the proportion share is allocated to residential and non-residential vehicle trips. This shows the road demand indicators. So we look at the average weekday vehicle trip ins. There's a trip adjustment factor. It's 50% for industrial office, 33% for commercial, 65% for single family. What that means is that a trip has an origination or origin and a destination. And so for instance, for single family and multifamily, we look at the commuting patterns. And so that's why the trip is more than 50%. And for commercial, it's less because, for instance, if Mr. St. John was to leave the meeting and stop by the convenience store to pick up a gallon of milk, convenience store isn't his primary trip. His primary trip is to return home. So that's why there's the 33% trip adjustment for commercial uses. So this is the plan, road improvements. We've identified several intersection improvements and a few capacity improvements as well. Total cost of about $4.6 million. Since we do not have a transportation model to model each of these segments to determine what percentage each is in terms of correcting an existing deficiency versus being 100% growth, we take a very conservative approach and just allocate the cost over all trips at the end states, meaning 2031. That way, every land use, or excuse me, new growth and existing development is treated equally. So you can't make the argument that new growth is paid for a higher level of service than what is currently being provided, and that results in a cost of $125 per trip. And so that results in a single family fee of $846 versus $575 for multifamily. You don't have an existing road fee now. From a non-residential perspective, commercial and retail generate the highest fee at $1,557 per 1,000 square feet, compared to $246 for industrial and $609 for institutional uses. Now, when we look at the road fee revenue, it's a different perspective, it's a different picture than the fees that we developed using the incremental expansion approach. Your planned CIP over the next 10 years is $4.6 million. However, the growth share is only slightly over $1 million, meaning that the town would have to come up with $3.5 million from other sources, whether that's general fund revenues, grants, federal dollars, et cetera. And so again, the fee revenue is about 20 to 22% of the total CIP. And finally, this is the summary where we compare the current fees to your existing fees. So the total freight for a single family unit under the proposed fee structure is $3,361. When we then multifamily, it was $2,188. Commercial and retail is $2,191. Industrial is $555 per 1,000 square feet. Office and institutional is $1,208 per 1,000 square feet. And when we compare that to the existing fee structure, that is an increase of $3,026 for single family unit. It's an increase of $1,897 for multifamily. It's an increase of $1,739 for commercial per 1,000 square feet, and then an increase of $334,000 for industrial, $334, and then $789 for office and institutional uses. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much for the detailed executive summary. That was great. I think it was both educational and very subjective in terms of some of the challenges that we're facing and working to address right now. And one of the biggest concerns that we hear from our residents and of the surrounding areas is how do we, grow responsibly? And as Mr. Holler said, this is growth paying for growth, and that's what our residents expect. And I think this is a much needed, refresh to our current fee structure, which is extremely outdated or has not been updated over time. And proud of the work that was done here. And I want to thank you and especially Steve Piles for a lot of the back end work that's gone into this, and Kathy Belcher. So with that said, other Finance Commission members that would have any questions or comments? One thing that Mr. Holler and I had a moment to talk beforehand, and maybe I'll save him a trip to the podium on this, but how do we address inflating cost year over year? So we're not have to go through this level of analysis, but what I would say is using acceptable methods to address inflation.
Yeah, great question. So two things. One is the fee study should be updated every 5 to 6 years, which coincides with, most community CIP is a 5 to 6 year window. Now, how you update the fees in the interim is a lot of the communities we work with, there is a built-in inflation adjustment within the fees. So every year there's an annual adjustment. Usually it's pegged to something like the RS Means Construction Index or the Engineering News and Record Construction Index. And so one year the fees may go up 6%, the next year maybe 3%, but at least you're pegging it to inflation. And then every 6 or 7 years or 5 or 6 years, whatever, you then relook at the entire methodology. So for instance, let's just say that 5 years from now, the town decides to add on to the municipal government space, right? And maybe the time is now to switch from a consumption-based approach to the cost recovery approach, because you oversized it, and so we have to reevaluate levels of service, and you adjust the fee methodology, right? And then also, the demographic change, the growth rates need to be reflected.
Thank you.
Quick question. Do you ever see a negative impact from these fees as people wanting to move into a community? Because as a buyer, I don't know if I pay that close of attention to the fee as I'm looking for the home I want, but do you ever see a negative impact on communities or community?
30 years, and no client has ever lost development over fees. There's a reason people and businesses want to move to a community, whether it's the quality of life from a resident perspective, whether it's transportation advantages, or availability of workforce, education levels from a non-residential perspective. There's a reason people and jobs want to come to it, right? And the fact that you've got a $3,000 fee structure is not going to cause development to move. And if that were the case, I think we've got 60 impact fee jobs right now, and probably 40 of them are repeat clients. So and they're multiple repeat clients. So obviously they haven't dissuaded development from going into those communities. Thank you.
I think you bring up a good point, and I had a chance to talk to Mr. Bice beforehand, but we do live in the fastest growing county in Ohio. We do live in the most undeveloped portion of that county, and this is no surprise, but growth is on our front door. The demand is here, and if you think back to just your economic model and how you address some of these things, is it's supply and demand, and demand is high. And I think we'd be doing our existing residents and future residents that want this to be the prosperous place that we know it to be. I think we're doing them a huge favor by acting based on this analysis here. Any other comments or questions, Mr. Vice? None right now. All right, that's great. You did a great job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the deck. And then Steve, will we see Mr. Vice back in council? Okay.
A little more streamlined presentation,
Sure.
but in case somebody comes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, we are on to, are we covering Little Walnut Creek Interceptor sewer?
There is a task order that was presented to me that is beyond my comfort level of just saying okay to. So, yeah, I would ask that you review that. And I think
It's about a third of the way down.
Pardon me?
It's about a third of the way down to the Columbus Task Force Proposal Amendment number 1. It's in the finance package,
Okay.
and it's before you get to the tables. It's right past the summary of the agenda, and then it's the next thing.
Okay. I showed as page 8.
Yeah.
Yep.
I forgot Olivia numbers the pages. I should remember that.
Is somebody going to speak to this, or do you want us to just acknowledge that we've seen it in our packet?
Mr. Parkinson's here, he may.
Okay, Mr. Parkinson, do you want to speak to the task order?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. In the process of our services to the city and the inspection of the Little Walnut Creek Interceptor sewer, our scope was broadened by the issues at the lift station and with the AEP conduit, necessitating a higher level of involvement and coordination efforts with the contractor in trying to resolve the issues and to keep the project moving forward in accordance with the time schedule that we had agreed with the developers to achieve. As a result, we exceeded our budget within our original task order proposal to you to complete those services. Anytime we prepare, and this one as well, for inspection services, we can't really predict at the time that we prepare these exactly what level of service will be needed. We try to make the estimate such that we never have to come back and take a second bite at the apple. And we try to make sure that we ask for enough without being stupid in our request. If we think it's 150,000, we're not going to come and ask you for 300,000 just to make sure that we've got enough in the budget should it be needed. So we had a fairly modest, I think, budget that we thought we could have met. And I would honestly tell you, and it sounds terrible, like I might not honestly tell you, but the honest truth is that had this not happened, we would have had adequate budget and we wouldn't be here today asking you for an additional authorization for this money. So we've already gone over budget. I didn't catch it in time. Our billings come about a month late. I should have caught it, my fault, but we went a little over budget. I think we went about 11,000 over the budget. We have asked for, and we think we need about another 21 or 22,000 to get us punched out, closed out, buttoned up. And that will happen in the spring when they can come back, finish the fence and finish the asphalt paving and finish the seeding and mulching that they weren't able to get to because of the lateness of completion. Once that's all done, we'll close it up. We'll tally all the costs for the assessments, and we'll finalize this thing and be done with it. And so toward that end, we've asked for an additional $34,000 to be authorized for our inspection services. And we have also asked for an additional task to be authorized, and we've asked for a budget of $10,000. And that's for assistance in your consideration of possible back charges for the issues that resulted in our difficulties. That was.
Can you say that last part again? I'm sorry, I missed it.
We've been asked to assist you with information and other information regarding your consideration in the potential back charges.
Right.
Due to plan.
Yeah, we purchased engineering plans.
Yeah, so-
and-
Yeah. And so that was never in any of our scope of services to do. We could have done it simply under our general services contract for you, but I thought best to ask for an additional budget within our inspection services as a task 5 to provide these services so that we can account for it within the total cost of the project. It'll all be in there and it can be included as part of the
Assessment model.
the cost of the project, which is assessed back to the properties. That's right. That's right.
Understood.
And so that's why we asked for that budget. That's an additional 10,000 budget we've requested on top of the 34 additional to finish inspection. So that's what this is. That's a very long-winded, and if I had, 8.5 by 11s with arrows and circles, it would have been a lot easier. But I think that explains why we're here and what we're asking for.
We're 11 over right now, need 34 more to finish.
We need 22 more to finish, so we asked for 34. 11 and 22 is 34.
So the work you've already done that you're going to donate to the city, we'll just wipe that clean. We'll wipe that off your bill. Just kidding. Okay, I get what you're asking for. $34,000, is that correct?
34 for the inspection and an extra 10 for the assistance with the ongoing negotiations with your consultant.
Okay, gotcha. All right. That'll bring us to the finish line. Everything
That
will
will
be
get us to
bundled into
the
the assessment model.
Yes, yep.
Okay. It's just an FYI only, nothing needed at this point.
Well, I think the administrator would appreciate some type of formal action by council to authorize him to authorize our request.
Okay. This government talk is a little funny.
So is that on our agenda for tonight's meeting?
No,
I think you could,
We
can you do it as a
We'll just
motion
write it down.
on a committee
There'll be a
report
motion
coming
on
out? I think you could do a finance committee report and a motion out of it. Okay.
Okay.
Is that okay?
And we're doing, it would be an appropriation of X dollars.
Yeah.
34,000.
All right.
and with the authorization, we can submit this to OPWC and they will adjust their budget. OWDA, and they can adjust their budget accordingly and increase your authorized loan amount if you would like to submit this for reimbursement through the loan proceeds.
Okay, understood. Does anybody on finance committee need me to say any of that in straight, or are we good? Good? Okay, all right. Thank you. We can do that in council as a motion. All right, thank you. All right, is there anything else? I thought we were going to be tight on time today for some reason, but we got right through that. Is there anything else you'd like to cover with us, Kathy, at this point, early on in the year?
A 3-year comparison for the general fund and income tax collected.
Great, thank you.
And I also did it for sewer. If
Great.
you wanted it for street, isn't that much, because you know what comes in goes out.
Would you mind speaking into your microphone, please? I'm sorry.
I did a 3-year comparison for the general fund and the sewer fund and income tax collected. If you want something else, let me know and I'll do it. Also on the street, on sewer fund, excuse me, I made note of what had been reimbursed. So I did a comparison with it in, and then I backed it back out to show you what it really was without the reimbursement in there. Interest rate is horribly low. We're doing an average of 0.09% or 0.01%. This third is our laddered CDs. We're doing better. That's 0.17% to 1.8. Any other questions? Anything you'd like to see or anything I can do that would help?
mean, I'll just speak to the 2021 general income. This is the first time I've seen this in this detail, but I'll show you. Here's my thought on 2021 general fund and the income tax and the disparity between the two. We purchased municipal properties. We invested more in parks than we ever have. And on the sewer improvements, let's say the wastewater treatment plant improvements, have those been reimbursed?
Not all of them.
Okay, and do we pay for those? Are we paying CT out of the sewer fund?
Yes.
Okay, what about Little Walnut Creek Interceptor?
See, that's why it's distorted,
Yes.
because we're paying it, but we're getting reimbursed.
Correct, and was that also out of the sewer fund?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's why it's a little distorted, and I've tried to back those out and give you a true figure, but it's not 100%.
Okay. It's close enough though.
We also did a fairly large road project
Right.
this summer too, or fall,
True.
near winter.
It's true. Yeah, we upped our investment in both repairing our streets. We didn't get the OPWC funding granted this past year. We installed a turn lane. Yeah, there was some significant investments, especially in infrastructure and parks and municipal, or I won't say municipal facilities, but property. All right. Thank you. Technology enhancements in the town hall. All right. Is there anything else, let's say from our paid professionals at this point? All right. Anything from the finance committee? All right. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second by Cindy Cooper. Discussion. Roll call.
Joe St. John,
Yes.
Cindy Cooper.
Yes.
John Grumney.
Yes.
Dave Martin,
Yes.
Damon Campbell,
Yes.
5 yeas.
So where's that?